Now, so far in the R36 restoration series, there's been a big focus on the underside of the car, namely the rear end, which was looking pretty tired after 189,000 miles on our UK roads. In the last few episodes, we stripped the car back to its bare shell and began attacking any of the rust that was present. There was quite a bit of it, but it was predominantly surface level, so I managed to remove most of it with a drill and wire brush attachment. The whole section was then treated to a fresh coat of primer and some protective Raptor paint. Moving on from there, it was time to build the car back up with some brand new suspension components, which I may have gone a bit overkill on, but at least the results were definitely worth it. Anyway, so the plan for today is to replicate that exact process, but for the front half of the car. So that's cleaning and treating the shell, and then installing the remaining parts that I never got around to fitting in the last installments. So yeah, there's quite a bit to do for one video, so we best get cracking. But first, a word from our sponsors, Car Vertical, who makes episodes like this possible. Now, if you're not already familiar with Car Vertical, it's essentially a website that allows you to obtain a full history check on any car. All you've got to do is enter your registration or the VIN. Now, as per usual, I do have an example report just to demonstrate how this service works, and today we're going to be taking a look at this Golf R. Right, so at the top of the report, you're essentially given a snapshot of the vehicle you searched for. So in the case of this Golf R, we've got no problems with any previous theft or the mileage being tampered with, but there is an exclamation mark next to the financial legal status and also the damage icon. So the records tell us that its last known mileage was 2,878 miles, so basically brand new, and it was put down as a category B insurance write-off. This basically means that it cannot be put back on the road. You can only break it for parts. And if you head over to the photo section, we can see the extent of the damage. Right, so 5-door in black with the standard Cadiz wheels. It looks like a relatively basic spec, but there's quite a few parts to salvage from here, being a category B. The interior is virtually unmarked. The engine bay is immaculate. So it's definitely the real mileage. But yeah, we won't be getting a full set of alloys out of this one. Right, so there you have it. That's Car Vertical. It's nice and easy to use. It will definitely save you some hassle down the line. I know it has for me on the various projects over the years. For example, on the Scirocco, it was a salvage car, but I used Car Vertical to confirm which status it was, and it was a category S, which means structural damage. And of course, we got the R36, which was bought sight unseen from an auction, so I made sure to get a report before even bidding on it. And as always, I have got a little incentive for you folks. If you go and click the link in my description and then use the code TRH, what that'll do is save you 10% off your next report. But yeah, big thanks to Car Vertical for their continued support of the channel. Every time you guys use my code, it helps contribute to one of these builds. But yeah, let's get back to work. So first off was the cleaning process. There was a bunch of mud caked onto the underside of this thing, and you may remember that last time I decided to hose down the rear half with the foldable indoor pool catching all of the water. Well, that still ended up making a huge mess, so I thought this time we'll use a mix of brake cleaner and our trusty friend, the wire brush drill attachment. It did take forever, but enjoy this montage that makes it all look easy. With the bulk of the car looking much cleaner, it was time to drop the subframe and suspension setup. This would also allow for the remaining dirt to be removed. These have literally done 0 miles on the road. They're from like episode 2. There we go. That last one there is rounded off, and because this is relatively crusty and I'm going to probably put a new one on, I'm just going to go ahead and break it off. Should be free to come out. There we are. Right, so we're done with all the cleaning. It took me about 2 days just because of the sheer amount of dirt that was caked onto the underside of this thing. Now, I'm quite surprised at the lack of rust on the whole front half of the car, let's say. I mean, you can remember the back end had a fair bit of surface corrosion. There was no holes as such, but it was definitely in need of treatment. When it comes to the front end though, I mean, it's literally just a few specks here and there. I mean, that's probably the worst bit in this wheel arch. But then check out this underside here. It's all completely smooth, which is pretty shocking for a UK car that's done 189,000 miles. This is probably the worst bit here, but again, nothing too crazy. I've ground it down slightly, so we're going to apply some rust converter to that. But it really is impressive. I mean, look at these sills. It looks like they've been detailed. That's how shiny they are. Yes, we could just leave it with it all being pretty solid, but I think it will look nice being covered in this textured black finish. I did go a bit overboard with the cleaning. I went right up there, but it's going to be tricky to Raptor that without getting all of this covered. So we'll probably put the masking line there, and then we'll focus on those areas when we eventually take the engine out and do chains or whatever. We'll do the base separately. But this wheel arch again is just like the driver's side. Nothing to worry about. Behind the foam again, completely solid. Right, so that's enough talking. It's time we get back to work. I've got the car masked up as before. Prep is definitely key in situations like this, as you don't want overspray on everything. I began with some rust converter on a handful of areas that needed it, mainly the front two jacking points. I did get them as close as possible to bare metal with the wire brush, but because it's in a bit of a sketchy location, it wasn't as straightforward. You don't want to rely solely on these sprays, so make sure you do put in the effort beforehand. After letting that dry, it was time for some etch primer. I opted for Halford's own brand as opposed to Raptor's acid etch product last time. It mostly does the same job, but it does let off way more overspray and dust, so make sure you're masked up and got some good ventilation. As usual, build up a few coats as it's got a short drying time and you should be left with a lovely matte grey finish. Right, so next it's time to apply some Raptor. Again, it's pretty straightforward. It dries fast and you want to do a minimum of 2 coats. The main difference here is the texture, so go light as possible with each spray as you don't want it to go all lumpy. But you'll know what I mean once you spray one of these cans. It's different to regular paint. I didn't want any Raptor getting into this gap, so what I did was I covered the foam in this. I will put it back in because it didn't cause any rust. I think it covers it just enough. One more up there, one there. Right, so the R36 is definitely coming along. The Raptor coating's all done. I ended up using 5 cans to get to this level of finish as opposed to 6 for the rear end of the vehicle. I'm well chuffed with the way this has turned out. The masking job wasn't too bad either. We can see the outer half of the sills are all still blue. I didn't want that covered. I've got into all of these nooks and crannies. Obviously the heat shields were all masked up. We're going to push them back into place. Now you may remember in the last video I had a bunch of components all laid out on the table that I got from eBay. I didn't actually install all of them because the front wasn't done. But now that it is, we can continue with the installation. But yeah, before we crack on with all of that, make sure you go down and click subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy content like this. I've got a bunch planned in this sort of format. Right, so we'll begin with the suspension strut first, and also the hub and also the ball joints, which we replaced in very early in the series. Now this is made out of aluminium on the Passat R36. It's quite a nice high quality component, but as you can see there's a bunch of dirt caked onto it. The body of the suspension strut is normal. It's got a bit of rust on there and the springs aren't cracked or anything, but of course we have got the B14 strut here with a new top mount. Now this is the other side. I went ahead and cleaned it up just to give you guys an idea of how it can look. But yeah, let me show you how to do it with this particular side. Right, so first things first, let's get this strut removed because we don't need any of this. Even though it's unbolted, I guarantee it won't come straight out, so we're going to use a hub spreader. I highly recommend you invest in one of these off eBay. It's just a normal generic one, but it saves you whacking your fancy aluminium hubs and destroying them. And sometimes even after all that whacking, you won't get the strut out. 10mm spanner. It's ever so slightly going to open that up. There you go, strut freed. Now, so for cleaning this, we're going to be predominantly using this right here, which is a wire brush drill attachment. I've got a few different sizes, but this normally does the trick. I'll do a little section here and you can see in real time how much of a difference it makes. That's literally 5 seconds work right there. I'm not doing anything fancy with the drill either, it's just on whatever setting. I initially thought I'd get damaged doing this method, but that looks pretty fancy to me, so we're going to repeat that on the entire thing. Okay, so that's the completed finish, or the best I'm going to go for. You can spend pretty much a whole day on this thing to get it absolutely perfect. So I went ahead and split the calipers into their individual parts. Thankfully, you can separate this aluminium rear section from the bits that need to be painted. It makes it a lot easier. I won't have to mask this. But as you can tell, it's quite shiny, and that's because I wire brushed it just like the hubs and whatnot. And the piston itself, I wound it back to its original position because we are going to be putting new discs and pads. I've also sanded these down so they're ready for paint. Got 2 separate pieces. I'll mask up these pins so they should be okay, and we'll basically go for the same color as the rears, which are in Volkswagen Surf Blue. I've been told that's the original color that came on these cars. This is the stuff I used last time off eBay. I know it's not high temp paint, so I'll have to just monitor how that goes. But yeah, let's get cracking. So I began with the same etch primer that we just used on the body of the car. Again, prep is everything here. You want to get as much of the old paint off as possible. The split design definitely made these easier than the rear calipers, as I didn't really have to mask up much or flip them over. Once the primer's done, it's time for the blue paint. This is definitely the rewarding bit. And to finish off, I gave them a coat of the supplied lacquer spray. Yeah, those are definitely some nice looking brakes. Brand new OEM brake line. The brakes are all done, ready to go on. The pads are in there as well. These are the discs that we're going to be fitting. They're 345mm like standard, but they're just in this cross drill style. Got some adjustable drop links from our good friends at Whiteline just to go along with the coilovers. Then we've got the hubs and also the subframe, which we cleaned up with a wire brush. They're looking very chromy now. And then yeah, we've got the H&RT roll bar, which will attach onto this and then offer it up to the car. Right, I think you get the gist of it by now. They're all shiny bits. The car's cleaned up. Let's just get it all back together. So first up was the Bilstein coilovers. These B14s are height adjustable, but I decided to leave them on the settings that it came out the box with. You can always adjust them on the car at a later date, and I've got no idea how it's going to sit anyway at this point, and this just allowed for the top mount to just screw on slightly. It's actually way easier at this height rather than jacking it up and whatnot. Okay, it's going up. With the strut and hob assembly in place, it was time to move on to the subframe. I offered up the H&RT roll bar first, but unfortunately it doesn't come with its own brackets for the D-bush. You've got to take it off the factory bar, and on that the nut is welded to it. So get hold of a 13mm drill bit and you should be able to separate it. The control arms went on next, as it's tricky to access these front bolts when the subframe is in place. Don't go too crazy with tightening them though, as there is a rubber bushing in there, which ideally needs load on it first. And yeah, from here it was onto the transmission jack and up onto the car. Cue the 20 odd new stretch bolts I had to go and replace. Top half goes there, and then we'll go with the outer setting, which is a softer one. I'm going to set the rear to the stiffer setting because I think that balance might work well. That's tight. Now at this point we were in the final stages. I was going to begin torquing everything back up, but unfortunately I noticed that the driver's side ball joint had a slight leak. This was a brand new Male HD branded item that we installed in an earlier episode, so maybe it got damaged upon removing the hubs. Either way, after doing all this work, I wasn't going to let this one sit, so I ordered some new ones for both sides and decided to go with Lemforder's brand. There was also an issue with the thread on the passenger side track rod end. It probably got warped upon removal, so again, new items for both sides. TRW was the best brand I could get at short notice. Out. Came out pretty easy that. Get the new Lemforder one in. Looks like a T40 thread in the middle that stops it from spinning, so I've got a ratchet spanner on that. Now for this track rod, we obviously need to crack off the nut there, and then we're going to spin this off, but you want to count how many rotations you've got to keep the same alignment. Obviously this is going to be all over the place, but I still want to keep the wheels somewhat straight. I'm going to use a pipe wrench, WD-40 on there. That seemed to have moved. He's already loose, so 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, and the new one, 15. Get that in. It's looking a lot nicer than the other one. It's tight. That should do the trick. And there we have it, brand new track rods installed on both sides, as well as the new ball joints, which aren't leaking at the boots. Let's torque everything up and then move on to the brakes. Now before we go ahead and install our shiny new brake discs, I've gone ahead and picked up some genuine dust shields for the front. Make sure when you're reinstalling them that the curve is on the inside, because I just tried doing it the other way and it's not correct. The disc won't sit properly. And the main piece of the puzzle, centered correctly there. Got a new retaining screw, of course. Very easy to strip these, so don't go too crazy. Let's get our caliper in place. The pad's already in. Make that threading. Now we're going to put the caliper pin in, but there's no real way of doing this without scratching up all of the bits that we just did. There we are. And to top things off, we got some new brake lines, which are braided, HEL ones. That's tight. Right then, so the brakes are looking nice and shiny. All I've got to do is complete the driver's side. But let me get that done and we'll do a quick recap. Right then folks, I think we're finally there with part 5 of the R36 restoration series. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Definitely looking a lot more cleaner up front. Of course, we've got these lovely new brake discs installed. We've got the Bilstein V14s. I didn't find any need to paint the drive shafts on the front. On the back, there was a lot more rust, but just used a bit of brake cleaner on these and they came up pretty well, and the boots are intact. We haven't even got to the engine as well. There's a bunch of oxidization, as you can see, on the engine sump. And the gearbox sump has a bunch of corrosion as well. You can swap out these covers, so we're going to do so. That little bit of oil there, I'm presuming, is from when we did the oil change on the filter, or maybe there's a new leak, we'll find out. And of course, amongst all these new parts, we can't forget the Raptor coating, which again has a nice textured finish and has completely the sort of contrast look for the rest of the car. Especially when you just stand back and get a full sort of view of it. There's all sorts of silver and blues and gold effects. Now I haven't gone ahead and attached the exhaust because I'm working on some different ideas for what I'm going to do with it. Yeah, if you ever wondered if brake piping can hold up a full system on an R36, it can do. But yeah, we'll work through all of these random tasks in part 6. We'll get the exhaust fitted back up. I need to bleed the brakes. Also the side under trays need to go back on, as well as new arch liners. I know there was a big gap since the last episode, but that won't be the case with the upcoming one. Also, I'm going to be revealing a new project in the next few weeks, so make sure you go down and click subscribe to keep up to date. Follow my Instagram at @tiahamza_. But yeah, I think that's enough talking. I'll see you in the next one.